trust your students. So discussing today's topic will be Cathy Davidson at at City University of New York. Now, let's get started.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank President Crow and the Remote Planning Committee for inviting us to be part of what I think is going to be an incredibly rich and informative 2 days of thinking about how to make remote learning actually a community. I'm Cathy Davidson, Professor of English and Founding Director of the Futures Initiative at the Graduate Center CUNY. I'm also co-director of the world's first and oldest online academic social network called Haystack, founded in 2002, and it now has 17,500 members, and we invite you all to participate. It's free. I'm joined today by Christina Katopodis, who's a PhD candidate in English at the Graduate Center and a prize-winning adjunct instructor at Hunter College. Together, Christina and I are writing a book tentatively titled Transforming Every Classroom, a practical guide to revolutionary teaching and learning. And with any luck, we'll have it finished and it will be out by 2022 from Harvard University Press. For the next 15 minutes, we're going to be talking a little bit about the history of the kind of learning we have now, which tends to be hierarchical, top down, one way. And what we're going to be emphasizing is that too much remote online learning emphasizes the worst aspects of bad teaching, which is exactly one way, one directional, and doesn't involve students in the process. Our presentation today will start with a little history, have a few facts, and then I'm going to turn it over to Christina, who's actually going to lead you all in an online interactive exercise, simply to show that if we can do it today with 10 or 20,000 people, you can do it in your classrooms this fall with 15 or 50 or 500 students. And it makes all the difference. What we know about active learning is it works. It works for making a sense of community. It works for motivation. It works for better retention. It works for applicability. It works in all the ways that learning should work. And we know that. Outside of formal education, pretty much all the learning we have is active learning, where students are engaged. They're not just learning from one person, they're giving feedback, they're talking with others, they're processing their work. They're constantly using their learning to make community and a more democratic sense of what learning is. So we're all, in a sense, co-learners, not just teacher to student, but teachers too are co-learners in this process. We're going to switch now to a PowerPoint presentation that will go through this a little bit more formally, but the main point is if we trust one another and trust our students, we can have the kind of vibrant, active learning, whether in synchronous or asynchronous spaces, that we all need to make online learning really a productive, valuable, and even endearing way to interact with our students and to help our students learn and prepare for their futures. So if we know that active learning is a better way to learn than either the traditional lecture or the seminar, how did we get to this place? There's a history. There often is a history. In the 19th century, the great project was how to school a population and turn farmers into factory workers and shopkeepers into middle managers in the new beginning corporations. As you can see from this slide, the classroom in the 19th century looked an awful lot like the shops of the 19th century. And there's many features that are important here and that we've inherited in our classrooms today. One, everybody is facing in the same direction. Why? Because there's a teacher up front, but there's also a shop foreman up front, and you're training people to that kind of attention to one person being in charge, deciding what counts, who counts, whether you count, and what forms of learning count. It's also the case that time, the school bell, becomes the symbol of the 19th century because you're training people in compulsory public education how to learn not something that does them good, but how to learn something that somebody else, somebody in charge, an authority figure has said is important content to learn. All that's divided into disciplines, it's divided into fields, and it's divided into time slots. 8 to 9 a.m. you're doing math. Doesn't matter if you've learned it or not, it's 9 o'clock, put away your math books, take out your geography book, it's time for geography. All of that is less about liberation less about social mobility, less about equality, less about anti-racism or any of the things that that we want to think education supports, and much more about subjugating humans, children, to a new world order that has to do with somebody at the front of the classroom. In communications theory, the difference between traditional learning and active learning is the difference between one-to-many forms of education, which you see on the left side of the screen, a traditional lecture hall with one person down at the front and every person faced forwards towards that screen, and many-to-many education, which is the format on the right, where students are actually talking to one another, exchanging their ideas, not just mimicking back to a teacher what that teacher says is right, and then reproducing again that one right answer on a final exam that earns some kind of credential at the end. This is actually exchanging ideas, thinking through ideas together with multiple people, not just one person, but with multiple people. This is crucial on many different levels, having to do with the diversity of knowledge, as well as the diversity of our students today. And again, the point I want to keep making over and over again is these are problems inherent in traditional on-site education. And unless we're careful, online education replicates and magnifies exactly the fault in our learning systems. Not the benefits, but the faults in our learning system. So that's what we have to guard against. In 2002, along with many others, I co-founded a network that I still co-direct called Haystack, which was founded at the National Science Foundation, actually. And it has an acronym that scientists love to call Haystack. HASTAC is the acronym, Humanities, Arts, Science, Technology Alliance, and Collaboratory. It's like Facebook. Anybody who belongs to the network, and it's totally free, and we're being called the ethical Facebook because we never misuse data. Anyone who's a member in the network can contribute to that network. So on your left, you see a class that I did with Shelley Eversley, another professor at CUNY, on Black writers and civil rights activists during the McCarthy period. Our students didn't just write term papers for us, they actually wrote their term papers on the Haystack website so anyone in the public could see them. It's a safe network, and that's available for anyone who wants to use them. On the right is a progressive pedagogy group that Christina set up that anybody, again, can contribute op-eds to, blogs to, resources, bibliography. That's a many-to-many network. Whatever you're writing has interactivity, people can co-create, people can add to it. There's no right or wrong answer as long as you're respectful and keep the terms of the network and serve the goals of the network, which is changing how we teach and learn. Anyone can participate. Too many of us are using online sites that look a little bit like the Brady Bunch. Some of you will remember what that is. It's become a cultural icon, but it's a pretty homogenous group of people all in their little boxes. On the right is the Futures Initiative, and we're all wearing funny hats, or several of us are wearing funny hats. We're diverse, and students in the world today are diverse. We are not a homogenous group. So the issue is how you help students break out of those boxes and really contribute as co-learners to the educational process. Some basics here. The former president of LaGuardia Community College, President Emerita, Dr. Gail Mello, wrote a piece in the New York Times in 2017 where she talked about how important it is not to serve a small portion, a selective group of students, but to serve all of our students and help every student to learn from where they are to a place that's better. She calls it the very difficult task of serving the top 100%. And she talks about how diverse that top 100% are. And I'm just going to read the numbers that are on your screen as well. 18 million undergrads today, over 40% go to community college. Over 40% work 30 hours a week while they're going to school. A quarter of our students today are going to school full-time and working full-time. A quarter of our students are over 25. More than a quarter are first-generation college students. About a quarter are low income. 25% have food and housing insecurity. almost 60% female now, 45% students of color. And then the figure that skews everything, 0.4% are at the Ivies. Think about how many books there are about the future of higher education that are written from the point of view of either professors at the Ivies or as if they're talking to the students at those Ivies. Phrases I despise, like coddled students. I don't even believe most of our students at the Ivies are coddled students. Excellent Sheep is another one that's written about Yale. They're looking at an extremely limited and unrepresentative group of students. And most of the students that will all be teaching online this fall or online anywhere are more like the demographics that Dr. Mello has described, not like the 0.4% of the students who attend our Ivy League universities. Why is it important that we teach for heterogeneous students? There are many reasons. One, students have different backgrounds. They come with different kinds of knowledge. And we have to ask students, we have to trust students. We have to come up with platforms that allow our students to tell us what they do or don't know. So many of the activities we do in active learning are precisely to help students tell us, give us back feedback on what they understand, what they don't understand, what they know, and what they don't know. The most moving account I've ever read or heard anywhere, it's actually in a film about the great science fiction writer Samuel Delany. When Delany talks about his first experience teaching college, Delany became a best-selling novelist at age 20. He never went to college. He's Black, he's gay. He went to the West Village where he found people he felt kinship with, but never went to college, and is famous for being an incredible polymath, incredibly well-read. If you've read any of his science fiction novels, they are dense, difficult, learned books. When he was in his 40s, he was offered a chance to come teach at Wesleyan University, and he said he prepared for it like he was preparing to write a new novel. He was so excited about being in this magical place, the Ivory Tower, higher education. He ran into the first classroom. He asked a question. He expected 100 people to be raising their hand, 100% of the students to be raising their hand. And in fact, 3 students raised their hand. Now, the guilty little secret we all know about higher education is if we're in a classroom of 30 students and 3 people raise their hand when we ask a question, we feel pretty proud of that. Not Delany. I'm going to read what he said. Don't you realize that every time you don't answer a question, you're learning something? You're learning how to make do with what you got, and you're learning how not to ask for a raise. You're learning how to take it. That's not good. So from now on, whenever I ask a question, everybody's got to put their hand up. I don't care whether you know the answer or not. You have to put your hand up. We need to teach people they're important enough to say what they have to say. He literally does this. He asks a question, even when he's lecturing 100 students, and the first thing students do is they raise their hand. Now, from cognitive neuroscience, we know that's important because it already tells students, I am here. I have a place here. I may not have read the assignment last night because I was working all night. I may not be as smart as some other people, book smart as some other people, but I have something to say. That's a life lesson. The challenge for us right now at the remote conference is how to give students that sense of agency, that sense of identity, that sense of I am important enough to have something to say in remote learning. I'm very active on something we call academic Twitter. And it's educators on Twitter who are constantly in rich, rewarding interchanges, that's many-to-many learning, about how we teach, including how we teach online. I'm now going to talk from a quote from 2 of the most active people on academic Twitter and 2 real experts in online learning. One is Dr. Laura Gibbs, who has a marvelous, marvelous blog. I encourage you to check it out at Online Course Lady. And she says, good education is informed by issues of equity and justice. That's not just writing about equity and justice, it's thinking of your classroom as an opportunity for equity and justice for everybody in the class, no matter race, gender, sexuality, ability, how you can make your classroom, online or on-site, a forum for equity and justice. 2, how you can, good education is always interactive and engaging. On-site or online, good education is interactive and engaging. 3, good education is challenging and effective. It's about how you learn and how you learn well. 4, good education involves practice. And 5, a good education includes an instructor who is visible and active, who exhibits care, empathy, and trust for all students. In academic Twitter, immediately, Dr. Lee Scaler-Bessett, who writes as Ready Writing, said, yes, all that's true, and physical proximity is not a precondition of good education. Physical proximity is not a precondition of good education. On the other hand, good education requires all of those things that I just read from Dr. Laura Gibbs. In other words, it has to be engaging, it has to be interactive, and it has to be, as Samuel Delaney said, a structure of equity and justice. I believe that before we even think about a syllabus, before we even think about videos or Zoom or what technology we're going to use, we have to think about something far more fundamental. We have to think about what it means to be a student now. This is a blog I wrote recently, actually on May 11th, and it's had over 50,000 unique visitors. It clearly struck a nerve with people. Whether teaching algebraic geometry or sociology or literature or art or religion, we need to begin with the question, what would I need if I were a student in this historic moment? Where do you start with that question? Ask them. Ask them. That's what I mean by trust your students. Unless we ask students what they need, unless we engage them in the learning process, again, on-site or online, we are losing the most vital experience that any educational situation can offer to our students. So again, before we think about Zoom, before we think about videos, before we think about syllabi, before we think of any of the mechanics, ask your students, what do you need in this historic moment? Are you learning? Are you confused? Do you have questions? Do you have issues? There are ways of doing that, and I'm now going to turn the podium over to Christina Katopodis, who's going to actually talk about inventory methods that allow every student a voice in every conversation, how we do that, how we can have equity and justice in our classrooms, whether those classrooms are on-site or online. Christina.
Thank you so much, Cathy, and hi everyone. I'm Christina Katopodis. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm going to talk about total participation.
Total participation, according to the American Psychological Association, includes techniques that solicit participation and higher order thinking from all the participants at the same time. So this can be pretty loud. In my own classroom at Hunter, I've had a teacher walk into our room at 8:05 a.m. asking us to be quiet because the share part of our Think, Pair, Share was too loud at 8 o'clock in the morning. So these activities can be loud. They can also be quieter, like collaborative note-taking in the same Google Doc. The room might be quieter, but you can hear everyone rapidly typing. And in the Google Doc, there are anonymous manatees, anonymous badgers, and squirrels, all of us together editing the document. Inventory methods like these can be used in a physical classroom or here in a virtual setting. They can be done synchronously. We'll do a Think, Pair, Share in a minute. Or they can be structured as homework assignments and done asynchronously. It's a great way to take attendance at the beginning of class by collecting students' responses. That's called an entry ticket. Or you might use an exit ticket at the end of class, asking students to write down the one burning question that they still have. Either way you do it, the principle is the same. Peer-to-peer learning means everyone participates. Everyone's perspective is voiced and valued. It's a good way to get to know your students, their questions, their struggles, and their triumphs. One can use this method to ask any number of questions. Professor Griffin at Columbia, for example, asked her students in a large Introduction to African American Literature lecture that went online at Columbia, what one book from class would you want to take with you? What, if anything, from your old life do you want to leave behind? What do you appreciate that you would like to take with you? What change, if any, would you like to see and commit to bring about on the other side? These questions are student-centered and show how active learning can be tailored to any moment, any movement, or any class. So now let's do a think, pair, share of our own. Now it's your turn.
Hi, everyone. So now it's time for the Think, Pair, Share. So in the chat, so that you all can see each other's responses, that's where we'll be doing this activity. So I'm going to time you for 90 seconds just to show you how quickly this can be done. What is one thing that you did or will do this year to build trust and or a sense of community with your students during remote teaching? So jot down your idea in the chat section on the left, and I'll give you 90 seconds to do this. And if you get done extra quick, you can read and write a response to other comments in the chat as well. So I'll repeat the question. What is one thing you did or will do this year to build trust and or a sense of community with your students during remote teaching? We're getting some great responses here. And just a reminder, if you have a question, you should use the questions tab for the Q&A. So you have about 30 seconds left, so jot down your idea in the chat or respond to someone else's. All right, so time is up. Thank you all so much. This is a great way to get 100% participation. Again, total participation. It's a great thing that could become an entry or an exit ticket. We've got some really wonderful responses in the chat, and you can read some of the others. There are one-on-one meetings, there's a popcorn, there are 1-minute activities, 2-minute activities. Thank you all so much for sharing, and keep them coming, and we can move on to Q&A.
Hello,
Okay,
everyone.
thank you for that.
So I think now we're moving on to Q&A. And first, let me just thank everybody who's contributing these amazing suggestions for trusting students and for community. I can't even read them. They're going by so fast. I hope there's some way that these are being collected so we can share them. There's probably 1,000 ideas that just zoomed by our screen. And I think the message there is it's not that hard. It's not that hard to show students that they have a voice in their own education and invite them to be part of it. So now Q&A?
Yes. So thank you, first of all, for our presentation from Cathy and Christina. And I do see we have a couple of questions from the audience, so we can go ahead and get started with the Q&A. So the first question is, if students are writing papers and submitting to HasTech, does that raise any potential FERPA issues?
Yes, it does. And that's why you have to make sure as a professor that you know what the FERPA rules are for your school. On Haystack, any comment can be shared just with the group or can be shared publicly. And so we have consent forms that we use when I teach a class, I have consent forms so students can make clear whether they want themselves used publicly or not, want to make the comments public or not. Also, anyone can register to Haystack. There's about a 2 or 3 day delay right now for registrations because we're all on hiatus. And we do have registrations fees. We don't want spammers. But you have to register your API and your name, but you can use a pseudonym. So for students who want privacy, they can publish their comments as a pseudonym, but we still have a responsible check on the Haystack site. Thank you for that.
So the next question is, I love what you're saying, but how can we ask that question, what would I need? when students won't be in our classes, online or otherwise, until the start of the semester, or some who haven't even registered for courses yet?
I can answer and then I'll turn it over to Christina. I always start my class, even before I hand out a syllabus, with index cards I pass around, and I have everyone take 90 seconds to write something about themselves. So the question might well be, the entry ticket for the first day of class might be, what do you most want to take away from this class? What do you most need in this class? And then I have that inventory right from the start. I don't have any way of knowing students even before anyone else does. So you can do an online version of that as well. And it's also a great way to make it clear that the student is first, not the syllabus. And then go to from those questions, those entry tickets, to the syllabus. Christina, what about you? Would you answer that?
So it's preparation in advance, but one great tool out there is the interactive syllabus, and you can send the syllabus in advance. You'd need their emails, so they'd need to be registered for your course. But it's a syllabus survey, so students actually fill out questions as they read the syllabus, and these questions that you design could also ask them for information about themselves to help you understand their needs, their reactions to course requirements, their reactions to the accessibility of some of the materials. And so if you Google interactive syllabus, it's a really beautiful project that engages students in the syllabus. And I see a note that actually if you refresh your browser, you'll be able to see the slides in the handouts now. That has been corrected.
I saw in the questions that some students like not to be distracted and learn better observing. Face-to-face, we do always have name tags for every student, because the sociologists of education tell us that 80% of students leave even tiny classes never knowing any name except the professor's name, because that's what top-down education is about. So we have name badges so people can learn each other's names, but we also have red, yellow, and green tags. So if somebody doesn't feel like talking one day, it's normalized that they just put on a red tag, and there are ways to do the same thing with online learning. Anybody is allowed to have an off day and to have a day they don't want to contribute, or a semester they don't want to contribute. There are many different ways to contribute. The point is everybody is invited to contribute. That's a very different thing than the normal selective way of running a class.
I also see a question about how the working conditions of faculty, especially contingent faculty, affect the learning conditions of students. And I just want to emphasize the importance of peer-to-peer learning and how giving students the support and supporting that, right? Having students learn each other's names, setting them up in groups, mentoring each other increases peer-to-peer learning. It really supports their learning. And that is the most lasting learning. It's really the most effective. And I think it also helps in terms of mentorship, that students get peer-to-peer mentorship as they learn and learn collaboratively. Again, as Cathy began the presentation, we are all co-learners. And so I think bringing more students into that experience of mentoring as a community can support both their needs and the needs, especially of contingent faculty.
I guess to add to that, one of my students, Stephen Berg, who teaches at a community college in Michigan, one of my very first doctoral students ever, he's a brilliant community college teacher and has published a book about his teaching on Haystack, in fact. He does something that's really remarkable, and he does it both online and on site, where he has group office hours where students ask each other questions before they then meet with him. And the excitement that is generated when the students talk to each other is truly empowering for the students. And often students are far more engaged talking to each other than talking to us as faculty. And of course, he also makes himself completely available for one-on-one conversations. But it's quite remarkable to see the community he develops, again, on-site or online, by asynchronous and synchronous ways where students can communicate with one another. By the way, somebody said an hour is too long on Zoom. I thought even 20 minutes for this presentation was too long. I know many universities are now requiring that people be on Zoom synchronously for the same amount of time they would be in class synchronously. I personally think that's a mistake, that it's just simply too long to be looking at a screen.
Unfortunately, we are out of time today. I do want to once again thank Cathy and Christina for joining us and providing their firsthand experience and leading the activity. Please be sure to explore the event to access more valuable resources from our sponsors and network with peers. Thank you and have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you.